I never really minded doing the work. What I minded was watching someone else present it. Slide after slide, report after report. My manager would stand there, smiling under the projector's glow. Leadership would applaud. And my name was never mentioned. Not once. I stayed quiet. I didn't interrupt. I didn't raise my hand, because I knew something they didn't. Audits don't clap. They iberified. At first, it felt pretty harmless, almost like a normal part of being on a team. I'd spend weeks on a project, pour everything into it, and then send a neat summary to my manager. A few days later, I'd see it pop up in a leadership deck. It would be reworded. Sure, the formatting would be different. With the company's fancy branding, it was always presented as our team's new direction or the department's latest breakthrough. I told myself that was just how corporate life worked. The team gets the credit, and the manager is the face of the team. But then, the questions would start. When leadership asked for specifics, my manager answered. When the praise came pouring in, they accepted it with a humble nod. The team was a singular person. There's a real risk in calling that kind of thing out. You know? You can sound petty or jealous. You can look insecure, like you can't handle someone else being in the spotlight. Worst of all, you can get labeled as not a team player. That's a career killer. So, I just told myself it didn't matter. The work got done. The company benefited. And that should be enough. Until it wasn't. This wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't just one project that got absorbed. It became a system, a predictable pattern. I would be the one to build the complex data model from scratch. I would write the detailed recommendations based on that data. I would identify and flag all the potential risks. My role was to be the architect, the strategist, the one deep in the trenches. Their role. They would take my finished work, present it to the higher-ups, field the questions, and gracefully accept all the recognition that followed. And I just stayed behind the scenes, invisible. Now, let's be clear. Wanting credit isn't about feeding your ego. It's not about needing a pat on the back. It's about visibility. And in the corporate world, visibility is everything. Visibility directly affects your promotions. It influences your raises. It's the foundation of your performance reviews. When leadership sees great results, but doesn't see the true source of those results, they build a completely wrong picture of the team. They see a brilliant manager leading the charge, and a group of nameless supporters quietly following instructions. That's when I realized how serious this situation had become. It wasn't just unfair. It was undermining my entire career. The wake-up call came during my annual performance review. I sat across the desk from my manager, and they said, "You've supported some strong initiatives this year." Supported. That was the word they used. Not led, not created, not designed. Supported. It felt like a punch to the gut. He just nodded, keeping my expression neutral. But while I was nodding, I was also opening a folder on my laptop. I hadn't built this folder for revenge. I hadn't compiled it for a dramatic gotcha moment. I built it for clarity, for my own sanity. Really, inside that folder was everything. The original drafts of every report, with timestamps proving when I created them. The email chains, where my manager explicitly assigned me the work, often with a tight deadline. The version histories from our shared drive, showing my name as the primary author and editor. Even meeting notes, where I was the one who first proposed the ideas that later became their big projects. It wasn't anything dramatic. It was just simple, undeniable proof of my contribution. I closed the folder, and the review ended. I walked away feeling validated, even if no one else knew it yet. A few weeks later, an email landed in everyone's inbox. Leadership was announcing a company-wide internal audit. But it wasn't a financial audit. This was an operational audit. They wanted to evaluate the company's core processes. They were looking at decision-making, project ownership, and risk controls. Suddenly, documentation wasn't just a formality anymore. It mattered a lot. The auditors began their work, scheduling meetings and asking questions. They weren't just asking what was done. They were digging deeper. They asked, Who initiated this project? Who designed the original framework? Who approved the changes at each stage? My manager answered confidently, At first, they retold the stories of success, positioning themselves at the center of every win. But auditors don't rely on memory. They don't care about confident presentations. They rely on records, version histories, email trails, file metadata. And as they started pulling those records, they found that the official story and the digital evidence didn't match up. I wasn't called into a big meeting to accuse anyone. There was no dramatic confrontation. I was simply called in to clarify some time. They had my manager's presentation decks, and they had my files, and the two didn't align. So I shared my screen. I walked them through my original drafts. I showed them my proposal emails. I pulled up my annotated risk analysis, explaining my thought process. The auditors just listened, making notes. They compared the dates on my files with the dates of the leadership presentations. They compared the author names and the file properties. They compared my manager's statements with the cold, hard facts in the email threads. A long, uncomfortable silence followed. After that meeting, something changed. It wasn't overnight, and there was no big announcement, but the change was real. My manager stopped summarizing projects alone. Suddenly, I was getting added to the presentation invites. My name started appearing on the title slides and in the documentation footers. Not in a big, flashy way, just accurately. There was no shouting match, no public correction, no HR intervention. The system had just quietly corrected itself. The biggest difference came in my next performance review. The language was completely different. Instead of that dismissive phrase, supported initiatives, it now read, Ledden developed key operational improvements that resulted in a 15% efficiency gain. Lev, developev, the words I had earned. Audits don't clap. They don't give you a round of applause, but they do correct the narrative. Looking back, I could have stormed into a meeting and demanded credit. I could have sent a passive-aggressive email, but I didn't. Instead, I just kept meticulous records, because when someone takes credit for your work, time and truth are your greatest allies. Eventually, someone, somewhere, is going to verify the details, and details don't lie. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever been in a similar situation, know that you're not alone, and keeping good records is your best defense. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about navigating the workplace. See you next time.